the horrible fate of the Asar Harugei Malchus. Which takes us now to the Heintige Gemara. So the Gemara says, Mishachorev Beis Hamikdash, Batal Hashamir. The worm that they used to cut the stones with were bottle. They no longer had it. Tanu Rabbanan, Shamir, Shabai Bona Shloimas Beis Hamikdash, with which Shlomo HaMelech built the Beis Hamikdash. Shenemar v'abayis bivanoisai Evan Shlema. It was complete stones. They weren't chiseled. Evan Shlema Masa Nivnen. So the first approach to understanding this pasuk is that Dvarim kicks oven. It's exactly like what it says. It was complete stones. They didn't chisel them. Divi Rabbi Yehuda. Amar Rabbi Nechemia argued, and he said, "V'chiev shaloimer kain." Can you say that there was no chiseling? Like Farnemar, Kol Eila Avanim Yikaris, Miguroris B'migra. They were plain, they were chopped, they were modified. So how could you say that there was no type of grinding or chiseling the stones? What does it mean when the pasuk says there was no sound of steel cutting the rocks when the house was built? You know why there's no sound on the construction site itself is because they prepared the stones out of the city at the quarry, and when they were brought in, they were already the precise size. So there was no reason for them to be grinding any type of stones. So I'm a Rebbe. Rebbe sort of made a compromise. Near Divei Rabbi Yehuda ba'avnei mikdash, the stones of the base of Mikdash, I hold like Rabbi Yehuda that there was no cutting at all. Evan Shlema Masa Nivna Hadvarim Kiksovan, like Rabbi Yehuda said. Where were there stones that were chiseled? That's the stones that built Shlomo Melech's palace. Those stones were ground. But Rabbi Nechemia himself held that they used metal. They ground and chiseled and modified the stones for everything. We do know that there was a shamir, this worm. Why is it that they needed it if they were able to grind the stones to size? It was used for the avanim of the Eithbite and of the Choshen that had letters engraved into them. These stones, they didn't write the names of the Shvatim with ink on the stones. They have to be kratzt in the actual stone. But they couldn't chisel out the names. They had to be complete stones. They did a pattern with ink, and then they would put the worm, the small little worm, or something was just the size of a barley kernel. They would put it on the line, and it would climb along the line, I guess. And the stone would split, so nothing would be taken out of the stone. No content would be removed. It just created a split, which formed the lines that made those letters. Just like a fig. You put it out in the sun, it swells, and then it cracks. But nothing is missing. That crack isn't formed because someone cut part of the skin away. The skin cracks. Like a dry valley, that the earth is dry and it cracks. Yet there's nothing, there's no part of it that's missing. That's what the Shamir did. It wasn't grinding the stones. It wasn't chiseling the stones. It just caused the stones to crack. It's the size of a barley kernel. And it was created nivra in the Sheish Shemei Bereshis. Ve'ein kol dover kasha yachal lamoid b'fanav. There's nothing hard that could stand in front of it, not even kryptonite. If it's such a powerful worm, so how do they contain it? It's going to break through any container you put it into. So this was the kryptonite of the shamir. Karchen oisai bisfugen shel tzemer. They would wrap it in like sponges of wool. Umanichen oisai beitni shel aver, and they would put it into like a tube container of lead. Mileya subei sarin, that was full of the bran of barley. and somehow that it wasn't going to burn through. Amar Rabami Mishachar Mikdash Rishon Batla Shira Parnida, a special expensive type of silk was no longer readily available. It was a chuchas levana and white glass, which is a very rare and expensive glass. And zechuchas levana and v'rechav barzal, metal chariots. I'm not sure why those were so rare. There was a type of wine that was very, very thick that came from Snir. Looked like a pressed fig cake. That's how solid it was. That's how thick it was. Snir to go along? Okay. Okay. My Neifas Tufim. One of the things that the Mishnah tells us stopped after the Beis Hamikdash was Neifas Tufim. What is Neifas Tufim? Omarav Soiles Shetzofa Al Gabe Napa. So the Neifas Tufim is a combination of Napa, sifter, Sofat floats. Imagine if you have such thick flour that's so juicy, it actually is going to clump together and look like dough. When they would sift this flour, there would be clumps there that would stay on top of the sifter because it was so thick and juicy. The pure flour itself was so thick and juicy, it actually looked like dough. What it means is, imagine you have two breads that are stuck to the wall of the oven, and they're separated. They're individual breads, but they grow so much that they end up merging and getting, they expand into each other. Rabbi Shua ben Levi Amar, I guess even if it was placed far apart that it would normally not come together, it expanded in a huge way. Who said we're talking about taste? So, not stupid. It's something that grows. I don't know. What is the special honey that came from Tzipaya? That's why there's a Neifas Tufim. It's Dvash that came from the high mountains. My mashma, where do you see this? Kimitagim Reb Sheshes. Come out the Notzon Davriyasa, like the bees go and fly. The Shaitan Beroime Alma, and they fly to the high mountains. Umas Yinduvsha Me Isvetura, and they bring honey from the plants that grow up on top of the mountains. So that's what Neifas Tufim means, because they fly for the high places. Tanan Hasam. When you have a Tomei Keli and you're pouring from it to above into a Tar Keli, so that stream of water connects the two. So it should be Matama, the bottom Keli. Zok to Gemara, Zok to Braisa, it does not. That's not called a connection. Unless that stream is so thick that it's Dvash Zivim and Tapichim, it's so thick that when you stop pouring and you stand up the top Keli, the stream is so thick, it'll actually pull back and contract into the upper Keli. That's how sticky and gooey this medium is. My Zipim, what are Zipim? Omar Rab Yochanan, Dvash Samazayfenboy. It's honey that you forge. What does that mean? It's so thick that it's normally diluted, meaning it's part of it is forged because it's diluted with water. That's how thick it is. It's from the place called Zifim. You see, there's such a place mentioned. Zif v'telim u'ba'oles. So Zif was the name of a place. You find another place where Zif could mean the name of a place. That's one of the kapitel of Tehillim. My Zifim. What does it mean? Who are these Zifim that came to Shol? It could be b'nei adam hamazayfim devrayim, non-trustworthy people who lie. That's one pshat in Zifim. But the other pshat is, so you see the word Zifim is used to describe the origins of this people or this honey. Upaska Anshe Amona stopped when Beis Hamikdash was Charav. What are Anshe Amona? Elu b'nei adam shein ma'aminin b'Kadosh Baruch Hu. These are people who believe in the Kadosh Baruch Hu. The Tanya Rabbi Elazar Agad Loimer called me sheyesh lepas besaloi v'oimar ma'ochel l'mocher. Somebody who has food for today, but he's worried about tomorrow. I don't know anybody who has that problem. Now, he's someone who has for today, but does not for tomorrow, and he's worried about tomorrow. Tomorrow doesn't mean next generation. Tomorrow means tomorrow. Someone who's worried about tomorrow, that's someone who's considered Katani Amona. In the times of the Beis Hamikdash, nobody was worried. Behind the Omar, there was zero stress. All the therapists were out of work because everybody had to talk. Behind the Omar Abelazar, my dechsiv, mi buzz liyoim katnas. What does it mean? Mi buzz liyoim katnas. Mi gorem l'tzadikim sheis baz b'shulchan and la'asin lavoi. What caused even the tzadikim that their shulchan should be would be eliminated or embarrassed? La'asin lavoi. Katnu shoybem, the immaturity that they had. They didn't have full amun in their body. That's one shot. Rav Amar Ela Katnei Bnei Risha Yisrael. These are the children of the Rishonim of Klal Yisrael, who, as an oynish to their parents, die young. And what they do is they're able to stop the midas hadin from coming on their parents in the olam haba. How do they do that? They tell the Rebbeinu Shalom, if you're going to punish my parents when they die and they come up to olam haba, so how come you used us to punish my parents in their lifetime, and you made them go through the horrible loss of a child? So because of that, Hashem does not punish the parents. Loss of love. Okay. Amar Rabbi bar Yevrachya. Ilmolei tefillah shel David. If it wasn't for the tefillah of David, or you call Yisrael moichvei revem, all of the Yidden wouldn't have high positions. They would make their parnasa out of lowly trades. Rashi's revev is davar mos. Right? There's a thing about Kamachacham has a revev on his beged, dirt on his beged. It's not appropriate. Going chayla v'shumin v'nidbak b'begodim v'nemosim. Ve'in lachadam esasak v'nela'ani. Only poor people are going to get involved in such trades where they're dealing with smelly, dirty things. That's what we would all do if it wasn't for the tefillah of David. Shenemar shisa Hashem moira lahem. And Rashi tells us, early in the pasuk it says, not forever we're the poor Klal Yisrael be suffering. Rather, David, shisa Hashem moira lahem. Tain lahem maris. Give Klal Yisrael some respect. Give them some respect. La'oisin aniyim oisher. Give those poor people, those poor Yidden, some oisher. So the goyim should respect us. We're not just schleppers. We're bankers. We're elite. We're intelligentsia. The yedu agoyim, and the goyim will know shehein enoish, that the goyim are only humans. They thought, the goyim think that they're something special, and the Jews are second-class citizens, because Klal Yisrael themselves are going to start being prestigious and doing high-level business and high-level professions. That the goyim shall see they don't control everything. So Tobit HaMelech made this tefillah, and that's why Klal Yisrael are the developers and the builders and the lawyers and the doctors. Why? Because of David HaMelech's tefillah. If it wasn't for David HaMelech's tefillah, everybody would be making herring for a living. The Amar Rabbi bar Yevrachya Ilmolei tefillah shel Chabakuk. If it wasn't for the tefillah that Chabakuk and Navi did, how you based Talmidei Chachamim miskasen b'talus achas. There would be two Talmidei Chachamim would have to share a beged. They would be that poor. Mishum Oini, as Rashi says. And that's how they would be Oisik B'Torah. Shenemar, this is right at the beginning of Chabakuk. It says, Hashem Shamati Shemacha. Pashup shot in the pasuk is, Hashem, I see what's going on, where Klal Yisrael gets punished, yet you're marich af, and you're letting the goyim get away with their terrible persecution of us. You're racy. I'm afraid because of that. Hashem pa'ocha v'kerev shonim chayeyu. HaKadosh Baruch Hu in our life, please fix things up and take revenge of the goyim on behalf of us. So we darshan the pasuk al tikra b'kerev shonim ela b'kerev shnayim. B'kerev shnayim chayeyu, meaning oisa pula shaloch tahainu dvar Torah tehi b'kerev shnayim, Torah which is learned with two people, Why? Because two people are forced through their oini. Two Talmidei Chacham are forced through their oini. Give Talmidei Chacham more parnasa. The problem is there's a Chazal somewhere that says Shisha Talmidim Miskasin be Shisha Talmidim are Miskasin with one beged. So if Habakkuk Hanavi's tefillah was accepted, as the Gemara says, how is it that there it wasn't working? So they say you have to be medayik in the lashon. Here it says Talmidei Chachamim Miskasim Talasecha. There it says plain Talmidim. Habakkuk Hanavi's tefillah was that once someone is already an established Talmid Chacham, once he's oishkeshtikin already, he's graduated yeshiva, then he should have a little more breakite, and he shouldn't have to share a beged. However, a Talmud, while he's learning, while he's growing, that was not the tefillah of Habakkuk Hanavi. And that's why nowadays, Bochum and Yeshiva have everything you need. They have air conditioning, they have food, they have no problems, they're relaxed, and then they get married, and they have all the sorrows and all the difficulties. Zok the Heilige Gemara weiter. Shnei Talmidei Chachamim Mahalchem b'derech. Two Talmidei Chachamim who are walking down the street. They ain't been named Torah, and they're not schmoozing and learning. Doesn't make a difference if they're each thinking and learning, or learning, but they're not learning together. They're deserving of being burnt in the fire. Shnemar. This was Elio and Elisha were walking when Elio was taken up to Shemayim. They were walking and talking, and Rashi says that how do we know that they were talking? They were talking and learning. There's a whole bunch of different Rishonim who have a different shop. Rashi says halach v'dibur b'divrei Torah from the halach v'dibur, from the fact that they were walking and talking. We know it was divrei Torah be'Elio be'Elisha. So what does it say over here? And what happened was that chariot of fire came zipping by and it scooped up Elio and brought him to Shemayim. And that's why weren't they burnt to death from this big rechavesh? Zok the Gemara time of the Ikadibur, because they were shmuzing and learning. Halakadibur re'uyin lisoyev, they would have been burnt. And Rashi says Shalmanas came by rechavesh alem. The rechavesh came to burn them both. And what happened was, since they were learning, they're speaking and learning, they just took Elio. You have two Talmidei Chacham are in the same city, and they don't corroborate. They don't work together. They don't not corroborate. They don't collaborate in halacha. They don't work together. Then what's going to happen is there's echad meis. Someone's going to die because he'll be killed by his friend by mistake. The echad goyla, and the other one who kills by mistake runs into golas. Shenemar lanus shama retzeach asher yitzach asher eyu bivli das. What does it mean bivli das? Vein das ala Torah. Since there was bivli das, there was not a collaboration of Torah in between these two Talmidei Chachamim. That's going to lead to the ritzicha b'shoyig, which causes the lo neshama retzeach. Shenemar, where do you see das Torah? It says nidmu ami mavlei hadas. Someone who learns Torah b'techat chak, tefilosay nishmas, his tefillah will always be niskabel. Shenemar says in the pasuk, "Ki am b'tzion yoshav b'Yerushalayim, bocha loy sivka." So the nation sitting in Zion in Yerushalayim will not have to cry. Chanoich yichanech lekol zakecha kishemosay. Your Hashem will listen to the coil of your cry as soon as he hears it. In other words, their tefillah will be nishmas right away. Hashem will answer you as soon as your tefillah is uttered. Then it says, who are we talking about? So we're speaking about somebody who lives, as Rashi says, someone who's struggling. Such a person like Kadosh Baruch Hu listens to his tefillahs. That's the end of the pasuk. I hear. All right, yeah, that's right. Okay, Gewaltig. They make such a person zat, satisfied, miziv shchina. And then Mark says in the pasuk, they'll be zoicha to see the shchina. There'll never be a gate, a mechitza, barrier between him and the Rebbeinu Shalom. Rashi says, "Lo yiskase mimcha bichnaf bigdoi u'mechitzasei." He will never be covered from him. So a Talmid Chacham who learns b'toich oini, b'toich atchak, his tefillos are nishmas. Things go his way, and he'll be zoicha to see the Shekhinah, whatever that means, and he'll never have a barrier between him and the Shekhinah. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, Amar Mishum Yeshua, v'yom shechar beis hamikdash. Every day, the klala is worse than the next. Amar Rabba b'chol yom v'yom meruba k'lalasim mishal chaverei shenemar v'boiker tomer mayitin her. In the morning they'll say, "Oh, I wish it was the evening." U'ba'erev tomer mayitin boiker. Correct Gemara, hi boiker. Are we talking about the boiker of the future or the boiker of the past? Ilam boiker l'machar. If at night he said mayitin boiker, I wish we were holding back tomorrow. Why would someone ask for that? Might be worse tomorrow. Miyoda might have it. Ela de Chalif. What he's saying is, El de Chalif. In the morning, he'll say, "Oh, I wish it was yesterday evening because it got worse now than it was yesterday evening." Correct the Gemara. If the klala is getting worse and worse every day, alma amai kamakayim. So how is the world standing if everything me'achash klala haleches tamid verova? Zok the Gemara akadusha de sidra, the kedusha that we say in the Uval Tzion, not the kedusha that we say in Shemona Esrei, but the kedusha that we say in the Uval Tzion, and we'll soon see why. The Yehei Shmei Rabba da Agadata, and Yehei Shmei Rabba that we answer after we learn Torah and we say Kaddish Rabbanon. Shenemar Eretz Avsa K'may Oifel. The world is getting dark. It's getting bad. K'may Oifel Talmovis. But V'loi Shadarim. There's no Shadarim. Hayei Shadarim. If our Shadarim of learning Taifiyah May Oifel, we will be saved. We will be brightened up from the darkness. So let's see what these Kaddishes do. Say the kedusha. You know why we say Uval every day? So that we should have to learn Torah every day with Art Scroll. The Varmut, just a little bit. What do you mean with Art Scroll? So when we say Kaddish, we say it in Aramaic also, right? I don't know the Lashon by heart, but we say after Kaddish, we say in Aramaic, and then after Baruch Kavod we say in Aramaic. So we're actually learning Torah. We're learning Tzai Psuk and Chemish with the touch. That's what we're learning. The Hein Oiskin b'Torah. It's like we're learning Torah by Uval Tzion. I'm sorry, Navi. That's right. The Chivin Shenoi b'Chol Yisrael. Since everybody says Uval Tzion, b'Talmidim uba Amay Aretz v'Yeshken Shtayim. There's two components happening here. There's Kedusha Hashem and Talmud HaTorah. Right? They're Mekadashim Shemaim. They're saying Kedusha, but they're also learning Torah. Chavavu. That's a very dear tefillah. That's what keeps us alive in the Golos today. And v'chein yesh me'rabba mavarach sha'oin nachar haggadah kadash and dorish b'rabbim v'chol Shabbos hayu noegin kach. Every Shabbos they would have a drasha. V'shama yimnikaptin kol ha'am v'shmoya v'sheni shem shemalacha. Since people didn't have to work, they came to shul to hear a drasha. And once again, the v'yeshkan Torah v'kiddush Hashem. Torah and kiddush Hashem is what sustains us in this difficult Golos. V'lo yara tal levracha. Tal didn't bring us such bracha anymore. The details have appears. Tanya we learned. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar Omer, Tahira, when Klal Yisrael stopped being careful with Tumah v'Tahira, Batla Tam v'Reach. The Tam and Reach of Peiros were diminished. Meiser, when people stopped being makpid on Meiser, Beetle Shuman Dagon. Mati, thank you for your correction yesterday. The fat, juicy grain also diminished. Rav Huna Ashkach Tumrasa Dechinu Nisa. He found a date that was a very fat, geschmacke, juicy date. Shockley took it. Karcha B'Sudra. He wasn't going to eat it. He put it away. Also, Rabbi Barei, Rabbi, the son of Rav Huna, came. Amar, he said, Tati, don't you smell that? Murchina Reicha Dechinu Nisa. I smell up a delicious, smelling, juicy date. Amar lei, gewaltig, am I happy? V'ni, my son, tahira yesh bach. You must have kedusha inside you. You must be makbid on kedusha, and that's why you were able to smell it. If you didn't have kedusha, you wouldn't even be able to have smelled it. Oh, very good. So what did he do? Yohav, he gave it to him. So what did Rabba Bar Huna do? Abba Barei, the Einkel of Rapuna, the son of Rabba, Abba came. Shakla, he took it. Yohav, he gave it to his son. Amar Leisha, the Zayda said, B'ni, Samachtas Libi v'Hekisa Ashinan. Yes, you made me happy, but then you gave me a punch in the teeth. Why? Because I wanted you to have it, I gave it to you. And what did you do? If you didn't want it, you could have given it back to me. Instead, who did you give it to? You gave it to your son? Hani da Amri Inchi Gavaltik. Rachmi da Abba Bani, a father loves his son. Rachmi da Bani, what about the son? He doesn't reciprocate that love to his father. Rachmi Bani, Abani the Habalei. He will want to have rachmanut on his child that he will have. I hear. Rav Acha bar Yaakov itbil be Rav Yaakov bar Barte. Rav Acha bar Yaakov used to. This is such a Litvish Gemara, such a briska Gemara about to learn. It's gewaltig. Listen to this story. Rav Acha bar Yaakov itbil be Rav Yaakov bar Barte. His nephew didn't have anybody to raise him, so he took him in and he raised Rav Yaakov his whole life. He godol. I'm sorry, his grandson. I apologize. Bar Barte, the son of his daughter, his grandson. Kigodo, when his Einkel grew up, Amalai Ashken Maya, he said, Yankele, bring for the Zayde a glazel Wasser. What did his grandson, who he raised, he did everything for him. What did he answer? Amar Loy, sorry pal, La Berechano, I'm not your son. I don't have a chiyuv keep it off for you. Behind you, Amar Inchi, Rabbi, you could have raised me and done everything for me, but Bar Bartach, I'm not your son, I'm your grandson. so the Mefarshim tell us this is what makes it such a Shemaka Litvish Gemara. You think Chas Sholem, if Yaakov was a coffee toy and he wouldn't bring water for his grandfather? Nein, ik houd hem niet lernen. Het gezegd van Zede, schuldig Zede, is bitte tegen. Ken het, bitte tegen. That's why it's a Shemaka Litvish Gemara. Ah, gewaltig. So you did everything for me, you raised me. The Pulmus shall Aspasianus, in the Pulmus of Aspasianus, what is a Pulmus? I believe Rashi actually addresses directly, but Pulmus means Chayil Shehevi Aspasianus al Yerushalayim. So in the siege, or in the occupation of Aspasianus, they made Xeris. Gozru ala Torres Chasanim. They were Gozer no more what we have. A Taurus Chasanim about Iris, and they no longer allowed Iris. And I believe the Gemara is going to tell us what these things mean. Mefarish the Gemara. The Pomo shel Titus during the occupation of Titus, Gozru al Atros al Ataris Kalas on the special Ataris that Kalas wore, and Vishalo Yalamed Adam as Bita as Beno Yavonis. No longer will we teach our children Greek. And the Pomo shel Achrain Gozru, and by the last occupation. And Rashi, and there's a Shalom Rishon, the order of who was first, who was second, was Titus before Aspasianus, was the after Aspasianus. Gozru, Shulatese Akala Ba'Piryon, the Soicha here. Akala will no longer go out in an Apiryon in the city. We'll see what these things mean. But for Rabbi Seinu Itiru, the Rabbanan overruled that Gzera, and they allowed Shulatese Akala Ba'Piryon B'Soicha here. Now we'll see the reasoning for this. Mishamesh Meir Batlu Moshlei Mishalom. When your mayor died, Moshlei Mishalom were bottled. And Rashi tells us, sometimes with a moshel, you can get extra clarity and a deeper understanding of a sugya. We lost that ability. Mishamesh ben Azai, Batla Shaktonim. Ben Azai was a moyudika me'amo b'Torah. He was majorly focused in learning. We didn't have that level of focus, that level of shkida. Shkida was always a mark on your report card. Shkida. So if you don't do well on if you didn't get a good mark on Shkida, you tell your father it's a Mefurish Gemara Sotah. If I would get an Aleph plus in Shkida, then I would be falsifying the Gemara, right? Mishamesh ben Zayma, Batlu Hadarshonim, the people who were able to darshan each word to know where everything comes from. So you baki b'tamei mekroyis to the Omar, like he says in the Haggadah, Lozechizi shete Omar Yitiz b'Trayim b'Leilos Atidorsha ben Zayma. Ben Zayma knew how to extract information from the Torah. Mishamesh Rabbi Kiva, Batul Kavod Torah. Why was that? Sheyenois and Liboy Lidrosh called Kutz v'Kutz. There was an appreciation for every little dot in the Torah. That appreciation came from Rabbi Akiva, Mishemesh Rabbi Chanina ben Doisa, Botla and Shemaisa, people who did Maisim Tovim were Botla, I don't, and Shemaisa, Batuach, B'chashivusoi, V'oisa Maisim Aploim. Someone who knew his greatness, because he was a Torah, he was a tzaddik, and therefore he did things. For instance, Yomer L'chaim Mitzvah Yidlai. He would say, Misha Amar, L'shem Yidlai, Yomer L'chaim Yidlai. That's a shtickle, daring thing to do. That was only able to be done after that time. After that couldn't be done anymore. And Mishemesh Rabbi Yosy Katanta, when Rabbi Yosy Katanta died, Pasku Chasidim. Chasidim stopped. Rashi does not say what Chasidim means, but it means people who are overly zealous in the serving of Hashem. Why would Rabbi Yosy have a suffix Katanta to his name? Because he was the smallest of the Chasidim. The Rashi says Chacham v'Oisher v'Kehanim Rabbim Oichan al Shulchanai. So Batal Ziv HaKahuna. Kehanim used to be treated with great respect. Why? Because they ate at Talmid Chacham would eat at the table of Rabbi Yechon ben Zakkai, and that didn't happen anymore. I'm sorry. Rashi says Ziv HaChachma. I'm sorry. I'm wrong. Zel lo yadanamahi. Rashi says, I don't know what Ziv HaChachma is. I apologize. I mixed it up with one of the other Zivs that we're going to discuss in a minute. So Rashi says, what stopped after Rabbi Yechon ben Zakkai died? The Ziv HaChachma, I don't know what that is. Mishemesh Rabbi Gamliel HaZaken, Batal Kavod HaTorah. Why was it Batal Kavod HaTorah? Rashi says, because Achemes, who are your Brias Ba'alam, v'lehayu lemedim Torah elam obed. Everyone stood when they learned. It's straight. Mishemesu yoret chayli la'olam. And people had to sit down when they learned, as we do today. Zok to Gemara. Bottle cover Umesa, Tahira, Uprecious. And Tahira and Precious died with him. Mishemesh Rabbi Shmuel ben Pabi, who was very wealthy, and he would always serve the Kohanim lavish meals in his house. Bottle Ziv HaKahuna, that covered for Kahuna stopped because they were no longer served very chashuv meals. I'm sorry. Kobe was, yeah. Mishemesh Rebbe bottle anova of a Yerschet. And when Rebbe died, anova and Yerschet were bottled. Toner Bacher. And Pinchas ben Yair Eimer. Mishachar Beis HaMikdash, Boishu Chaverim, Talmid Chachamim were embarrassed. Became embarrassed. Uvnei Chayrin, and Bnei Chayrin were embarrassed. V'chafu Roisham, and they had to put their heads down. So Rashi's Miyuchasen means, Bnei Chayrin means Miyuchasen. Chavu Roisham means Shegover Yad Azei Ponim Mamzerim Shemashirim Ve'elu Aniyim. The bad people who were wealthy, they subdued, pushed down, that these people were no longer respected. It was the money that everybody respected. V'nidaldalu Anshe Maisa, and no one cared about what the Anshe Maisa did. The Gover Balei Zroya, who took over, the tough people, Balei Loshoin, and the people who had sly tongues, Ve'in Doiresh, Ve'in Mevakesh, Ve'in Shoyel. No one's looking for Torah. No one's worried about Klal Yisrael. Ve'in Doiresh L'Yisrael, Ve'in Mevakesh Aleim Rachman. There's no one anymore to be Mevakesh Rachman for Klal Yisrael. How are we going to survive? Al mi lanu lihishoyin al avinu shebashamayim. We have to rely on the Kadosh Baruch Hu. Okay, Zok to Mervatra, Herbelos God Leimer, Miyom Shachar Beis Hamikdash, Sharu Chachimaya, Lahavik Sefraya. The Talmid Chachamim went down the Madrega, and they could no longer say Rosh Yeshiva Shiurim. They had to become Cheder Rebbeim. V'Sefraya Kechaznaya. Even the Cheder Rebbeim became like Shemosim. They weren't able to teach Torah. The Chaznaya and the Shemosim Amar Da'ara became like Amaratim. Amar Da'ara, and what happened to the Amaratim? Zok to Heilig Gemara, Ozla v'Dildala. They just fizzled out. Rashi changed the Yosy to Ozla v'Nivla, Hoichin v'Dalim u'Misnavel. They became weak, poor, and menuvol. Vein Shoyel v'Mevakish. And who's davening for Klal Yisrael? Al mi yesh lishon al avinu shabashamayim. Ve'ikvis Mashiach. So when you read this Gemara, this is exactly what's going on in our day. Chutzpah Yaska. Chutzpah is going to take over. The Yoker Yamer, and there'll be inflation. I mean, look at it. There's major chutzpah. There's major inflation. Hagefen, Tita, and Pirya, there'll be plenty of yield. There'll be plenty of grapes. but still vayai biyoker. Still, wine will be very expensive. Why? Shakal oishkin b'mishtois. Everybody's busy trying to numb their pain, so they're running after narcotics. Umalchus they helpech l'minus, and the malchus will become kfuim der Beishlem. This whole climate change nonsense is because they don't want to believe. They villainize, they vilify religion. And there'll be no one giving musar. The question, everybody is so bad, so you can't even correct somebody else. You know why? Because you'll be accused of hypocrisy. If you try to give some musar, they'll say, "Who you're a hypocrite? Who you do the same verse as I do." And Beis Vad, places where people would get together to learn Torah, fall to horrible places, Yel is nus, they would become a Makam Znus. And Rashi says, because normally the Beis Medrash was out of the city, it was more of a secluded area, so they used it to engage in not nice things. The Galil will be destroyed, Vagavlim is the name of a place, Yoshim will become desolate. And people from the border, Yisayvu Me'ir Le'ir, they'll be dranging from city to city trying to find Karnosa, no one's going to have Rachmanis on them. The Chachama Soifrim Tisrach. And the Chachma of the Chachamim will become smelly. The right ashkafas and the right ideas will become smelly, and it'll be taken over by horrible leftists. The Yirechet Yimasu, people who are Yirechet, they'll become Mos. Today, someone who's against LGBT is considered a pariah, is considered a Russia. So that's Mamash Yirechet. Well, MS Teina Deres, and MS will be lost. The Mepharshim say it means diminished, not completely lost. And now listen to this. There's a glaring omission in this list of symptoms. Let's see if the other one will notice it. Na'arim Pnei Zekenim Albinu, the youth will embarrass the chutzpahdik to the elders. Zekenim Yamdim Pnei Tanim, the elders are going to stand up out of respect for the young people. Ben Minaval Ab, a child will degrade his father. Bas Kama Be'ima, a daughter will stand up over her mother. Kala Bechamoisa, and a daughter-in-law will be chutzpahdik to her mother-in-law. Where's the item in the share? Is that not missing? So I have two pshatim. One pshat is the item in the share hachin langa hate for the blame. That didn't start. That's not just starting beikva de Mashiach. That's an old problem. But Shlomi Zolti wanted to tanya is no. We still have some hope left. We still have forget the items should they deserve to be celebrated. And then oiva ish anshe beisai. A person's own family will have no respect for him. They'll hate him. Pnei ador k'pnei akelab. The leader of the generation will look just like a dog. Haben einem misbaish mi'ov, a son will no longer be embarrassed from his father. So when we're in such a bad position, Valma yesh lonu lishoin alavina shel shemayim. Dr. Hela Gemara, Amarav, lo shanu ela shel melach the gaffers. That we say that you can't have a certain ataris chasanim. That's only if it's made out of salt and sulfur is what they use. They would take very clear stones like melach, like a glass, and they would draw pictures on it with sulfur. It was a very fancy thing. Abashal hadas, abashal vered, that of a hadas, and that of a rose, mutter, that's not so elaborate, that would be allowed. The Shmuel Omer, abashal hadas, shal vered aser, shal kanav, shal chelas, it was made out of grass or reeds, that's even less fancy, mutter would be mutter. The Levi Omer, abashal kanav, shal chelas aser, the Chaitan, the Levi, Mestisa, abashal kanav, shal chelas aser, any type of a teres chasanim was going to be aser. Dr. Gemara weiter. But Irus was also outlawed. Ma Irus, Amar Belazar, Tavla the Chad Puma. It's some type of instrument. Rashi is a bell with only one ringer inside it. It was a type of instrument. Rabbi Bar Huna Avadei Lebarei Tanbura. He made some type of tambourine, which was basically like a circle of wood that had a shmata stretched over it. So you tapped on it, and it had some metallic things hanging on it that would also make noise, and it would sound very similar to this Iris instrument. Also, so the Zayda came to the Chasana, and he walked over to the band, he grabbed the tambourine, and he smashed it. Taver, he broke the instrument. Amalei, we can't allow this at our Chasana. Michlaf b'tavla. It sounds like a tavla de chatuma. You want to do something? Zil Ovidlei, or he went and made for him something that would be allowed. He made for him apuma de chatzva, apuma de kviza. He took some type of keli and stretched the leather over it to create that surface, and that would be allowed because that doesn't sound. It's a bigger keli. It doesn't sound like this special type of bell. The poma shel titis gazru ala teres kalis. Maya teres kalis. What exactly are they outlawed here? Amar Rabba bar bar Chana Amar Rabbi Yochanan. It was an ear shel zov. It was a piece of jewelry that had a picture of the city, of a city on it. Okay? Tanya Namihachi, Ezo Ataris Kalos, Ir Shozov. Abel Oisa, Kipa Shel Mila. She's allowed to make some type of hat made out of white, Semer Lovan, out of white wool. Tana Abal Chupas Chasanim Gozu. They also disallowed something called Chupas Chasanim. My Chupas Chasanim, it's Zahiris Hamasabais. Rashi says it's a talus that is dyed red and it has gold pieces woven into it, which gives it some rigidity, so it makes it into like a hat. Papyrus, you're allowed to make it papyrus. Rashi actually goes papyrus. It's a shiloh what that means, if it's a chuppah, if it's a type of hat, but you're allowed to do that. But toilaba, kol mashiach, and you can hang any type of charm you want on it. You're not allowed to teach your child Greek. Klal Yisrael always suffers from within. They take themselves down. There was a machlokes between two brothers of the Chashmonai descendants that were fighting over the Malchus. Who were fighting? Hyrcanus was out of the city. Varistobulus was inside the city. And they were fighting, but they still had to keep the Beis HaMikdash going. They were both Jewish. Every day, the people from inside the city, the Aristobulus people, would send money out to meet them. And the Hyrcanuses would send up animals for the Karban Tamid. There was an older person, Yena Villain, who was inside the city. He knew Chachma Yavanis. And we're soon going to see not necessarily Chachma Yavanis, meaning the language. It means they had a certain way of speaking or a certain way of making signs to communicate that the average person didn't understand. Laws Lahem B'Chachma Yavanis, they told him the following. Amalan, he told the people on the outside, as long as you're allowing us on the inside to bring karbanis, you're never going to win. So what did they do? And what did they put back instead? What did they send back for the money? When the chazir was halfway up the wall, his hoof got stuck into the wall of Yerushalayim. The whole Eretz Yisrael shook because of that horrible situation. And at that point, they said, Amru or Adam Shigadal Chazerim, cursed is the person who's going to raise pigs. The or Adam Shialamid Levnoi Chachmas Shivanis. About that year, we learned other things. Maisu Ba Omer Miganos Srifim. They destroyed the fields all around the city where they would want to normally bring the Karban Omer from close by, and they had to bring the Karban Omer from very far away. And is that so that you're not allowed to speak Yavanis? Lama. Why do we speak Lashon Sursi in Eretz Yisrael? Speak Ella, Lashon HaKodesh, Lashon Yavanis. Either speak Lashon Kodesh or Lashon Yavanis, which are common languages. So you see clearly that Lashon Yavanis is not a problem, because he was suggesting that's what they should speak. Lashon Parsi. Dr. Gemara, Lashon Yavanis l'chut. Lashon Yavanis, the language of Greek, is allowed to be spoken, but the Chachmas Yavanis, what they outed was Chachmas Yavanis, which is a higher level of communicating. Correct, Gemara. The Chachmas Yavanis Miyasira, is that going to be also Bamar Bidom Shmuel Yishum Abshim Gamliel? My Dechsiv, it says any oil of nafshi Michal B'Naisiri. I'm suffering more. I'm more misabel than everybody else. You know why? Because Elif Yiladim Hayu Bebeis Abba. My father's household, Rabbi Gamliel's household, had 1,000 Yiladim. Chamish Shemeis Lamdu Torah, 500 Torah. The Chamish Shemeis Lamdu Chachmas Yavanis. Lo Nishtar Mehen Elani. I'm the only one who's left. Elani Kanu Benachi Abba Ba'asya. So the question is, what Shimon Gamliel was, he was being misabel more than everybody else because I came from such a huge family, and now there's only me and my brother left. But at the end of the day, he said that Rabbi Gamliel in his household taught 500 children Chachmas Yavanis. How can you say it's not allowed? Since they were always mingling with the kings, they had to know the language. They had to know how to communicate there. They were diplomats. The Tanya Misbakumi, it's a type of haircut that the goyim used to have. or Mesaper Kumi Hareza Midak Kemori, it's not allowed to Dak Kemori. But Avtulas ben Reuven Hitiru Mesaper Kumi, they allowed him to have such a haircut to Karvel Malchus. So Beishav and Gamliel Hitiru Lam Chacham Shavamis. If they should Karvel Malchus, they were always dealing with the government. They had to know how to speak it. The Pumas Achlin Gozer shall take a Kalabah period. My time Shem Tzniusa. It said they were Gozer, they shouldn't, but their abundance said they could. Why could? Because Tzniusa, when the Kala goes out in the city, she should be covered over. Mishemesh Rabbi Yochanan Batla Chachma Tanu Rabbanan. Mishemesh Rabbi Eliezer Nigna Sefer Torah. The Sefer Torah was hidden. Mishemesh Rabbi Shua Batla Eitza Umachshava. Eitza and Machshava. Rashi says Shal Yazoyer. Well, Sefer Torah is Shal Yabal Halachos. Mishmua Harbe. So he knew all the halachos. So that was Batal. Eitza Machshavas. He was Zoyer in the drushes, and he was a bucky in the halachos and how to answer apikursim. He knew how to deal with missionaries. So since they no longer had the ability to deal with missionaries, Hashem calmed the missionaries down, they themselves, so because there was no one to answer them. Mishmesh Rabbi Kiva, Batlu Zroye Torah, the strong arm of Torah, where she says, Oimek Svara, Rabbi Kiva had the ability to understand deep the Torah, the Nistabu Bayanis Chachma, and the well springs of Chachma became plugged. Mishmesh Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, Batlu Ataris Chachma. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah was very, very wealthy. So Torah came with great riches. That stopped. Shateres Chachamim Ashram. This is unbelievable. What gives Chachamim the power to be listened to? Their wealth. Everybody knows the story about the fellow who begged his friend, the yeshiva man, he begged his friend to lend him $100,000 for an hour. His friend says, "What do you need it for?" "Just lend it to me, I promise I'll give it back to you in an hour." And that's what happened. So his friend asked him, "What did you need it for?" He said, "I was going to take a probe. I was going to be giving a shir because they wanted to see if I should be a rav. So I was going to give a shir in the shul. I want you to know you speak a lot better when you have $100,000 in your pocket." So that's mamish what the Gemara says. Batlu Anshe Maise. Anshe Maise were batlu. Mishemes Abba Yosy ben Katnusa batlu Chasidim. V'lama Nikra Shmoi Abba Yosy ben Katnusa shoyu mekatnei Chasidim, like we looked in the Mishnah. Mishemes ben Azai Huchpelu Tzaris. Our Tzaris were doubled down. Oh, batla Shakdonim. I'm sorry. Shakdonim were batlu. Mishemes ben Zoyma batla Darshonim. Mishemes ben Shimon Gamliel Allah Guvoi. What happened is the grasshoppers came up and started eating our food. For Rabu Tzaris and many Tzaris came upon us. Mishemesh Rabbi Hokbul Tzaris got even worse. Mishemesh Rabbi Batla Nova V'Yirscheit. Amalei Rabbi Yosef Latana Lo Sistei Anova. Don't say Anova the Ikana. Don't say Batla Nova. I'm still around. So everybody asks what this means. So I think the Goyen says the Ikana. Rabbi Yosef says, if the Olam could take me as a Rav, everybody must be great Anovim. That's one shot. Amalei Rabbi Nachman Latana Lo Sisni, and we'll stop here. And Be'ez Hashem, Baruch Hashem, we were zoicha to finish, almost finished Masechah Sotah. We should be zoicha to finish many, many, many more Masechtas. Yeah. So we'll finish that up later. This is the Mesil Sharm. I don't want to. Outside of the Masechta and Sira, I don't want to finish. Oh, it's a bit. Should we start right away? Okay. That's the minhag. Okay. Maybe get. The summer brings a get from overseas. Someone brings a get from overseas. The shliach has to say that I saw it being signed, I saw it being written, and I saw it being signed. Someone told me there was a yeshiva where they didn't learn Gittin because whenever they learned Gittin, they had a multitude of Gittin in the community during that Masechta. So I say we shouldn't learn Sotah, but so you state that the Gemara. Okay, so we'll stop here. Shkoyach, everybody.